From the Cube studios in Palo Alto and Boston, bringing you data-driven insights from the Cube and ETR. This is Breaking Analysis with Dave Vellante.
Last week, we said Snowflake was attempting to cross the Rubicon, vaulting from cloud data warehouse innovator into AI leader in intelligent application platform. This week, the competitive fire got a fresh accelerant. As usual, Databricks followed up Snowflake's summit and put forth bold claims of its own, emphasizing unified governance, data intelligence, simplified user experiences, transactional capabilities, which we're going to talk about, and of course, open data. Now, coming off the Data plus AI Summit, Databricks is no longer pitching just faster lakehouses. It's unveiling a three-tier battle plan. At the foundation sits a mature data and MLOps platform, the company's heritage. Now, above that, a nascent block that we refer to as system of intelligence, which is this living, governed map of metrics and dimensions and causal levers. And perched on top is the system of agency, where autonomous workflows, they promise to convert insight into action without human middlemen getting in the way, but of course with humans in the loop to guide agents and teach them along the way. Now, if this model takes hold, we believe the center of gravity in enterprise tech shifts from storing data to encoding meaning, and whoever controls that semantic digital twin will dictate how every downstream agent behaves. Of course, ambition doesn't close deals, so to seize the high ground in our view, Databricks must prove three things. One, that Genie, which is its conversational AI interface, and Databricks One, a reimagined user experience, can capture user intent fast enough to enrich the semantic core. Second, that Unity catalog metrics can lure in the ecosystem to contribute rather than siphon out context. And third, that Agentbricks, the new MCP interface, Lakebase, which is a Postgres-compatible transaction engine, together form the components of Databricks' intelligent platform that can become the epicenter of data workflows that push decisions back into systems of record at production scale. So in our view, this is more than a feature shootout with Snowflake. It's a race to deliver what we call useful enterprise AGI, which is behind the corporate firewall, where CEOs like Jamie Dimon sit on a trove of proprietary data that matters more than internet-scale LLMs, which are facing commoditization. The stakes are defining who owns the next decade of enterprise value creation in software. Hello and welcome to this week's theCUBE Research Insights powered by ETR. In this breaking analysis, George Gilbert and I continue our theme of crossing the data Rubicon. Our focus today is mapping what we heard at Databricks Data and AI Summit into our system of intelligence and system of agency framework that George has been working on and I've been reporting on now for quite some time. Now, last week, we argued that Snowflake's aspirations to cross the Rubicon were represented by pushing beyond warehouse economics. And George, we're going to get into this. So good to see you again. Thanks. I think this is 3 in a row.
It's becoming a habit.
It's a good habit. Okay, so we're talking about pushing Snowflake last week, pushing beyond warehouse economics into transactions, eventually into application logic. And our assessment is that Databricks is racing toward a similar destination with a different strategy. Databricks is expanding its ambitions with an even more expansive vision that it calls data intelligence. And the slide you're seeing now frames that ambition. So at the base, you see Databricks Lakehouse, which we're going to talk about throughout, and transactional services. That's no longer the story. They're really kind of table stakes. What's new are the layers on top, framed in this new software architecture that we've been laying out for the last several weeks and months, that we've been envisioning, and we think that Snowflake like Snowflake, Databricks is methodically climbing Geoffrey Moore's hierarchy, first enabling generative AI to really be the user experience, and then unleashing agents that can both ask, you can interact with, and act on behalf of humans. All that, of course, governed by the Databricks Unity catalog. Now, in terms of semantics, both technical and business, if Databricks can truly own those semantics, as Ali Ghodsi implied, it positions itself not just as a data platform, but as kind of an operating system for enterprise data and AI. So George, That's the aspiration anyway. You were there at Databricks Data plus AI Summit. The open question is, how baked is this? How far along is each layer really? And where are the gaps? What's your thought?
Okay, so the key thing is what you mentioned. Ali said at Analyst Day, owning semantics is existential. This is the data intelligence. That's because data programs or drives AI. And it's an enterprise's ability to refine data to reflect how its business operates that will drive each business's own AI, their analytics, their agents. And you can have the world's best analytic engines and frontier model agents, but they only deliver effective intelligence and autonomous action based on the quality of the map that each enterprise creates with its own data. So agents will learn how to augment their human supervisors from this map. And the frontier lab models may directly power or distill the models inside these agents, but turning that into unique economic value belongs to each enterprise. And it's the enterprise vendors like Databricks that aspire to help companies build this map. That's why the true value of enterprise AGI will belong to enterprises that can build a 4D map or digital twin of their operations, what we're calling the system of intelligence. That guides agents and their human supervisors not only about what happened, which is metrics and dimensions, which we're going to talk about in detail, but why something happened, what's likely to happen, and then what should we do?
Okay, got it. And we've been using this framework that George has put together. So let's zoom in on a portion of that framework, the system of engagement block, which is highlighted here in red. So think of this as like a front door that Databricks has re-architected for business users. So at Summit, they wrap Genie, which is their generative BI front end, together with AI and BI dashboards and a growing library of packaged apps under a single portal that they're calling Databricks One, which is a new user experience, which is again designed for business users. Remember, their mission is to democratize, data and AI. So we think this is more than a cosmetic consolidation because they're encouraging analysts and line of business folks to talk to their data through natural language. Databricks is funneling every question back into its semantic layer. So the goal is to harmonize metrics across teams and over time, enrich those semantics with user intent, which is going to power agents to act with greater confidence. And of course, humans as well. Ali even said, that way we're not going to be arguing for 15, 20 minutes in the meeting about where these numbers came from. So we believe this move also telegraphs an ecosystem play, meaning the intent is to capture user interactions first and then invite third-party apps to ride on the same semantic spine. The open question is whether Databricks can truly dominate that UX layer against specialist BI players, which is something we kind of talked about last week with the Snowflake conversation. George, walk us through how robust Databricks One is and Genie are. What's the significance and whether that feedback loop into data intelligence is as tight as the company projected at this week's summit?
So let's use an analogy why owning or driving the adoption of the system of engagement is so important for the system of intelligence, what Ali is calling data intelligence. It's analogous to how the rise of smartphones accelerated the adoption of cloud. You needed a new, more scalable and resilient operating model in the cloud than on-prem to support the scale and interaction that smartphones provided. Similarly, the system of engagement needs data intelligence or a system of intelligence behind it. And this is why Databricks is so serious about getting into BI and this system of engagement, both traditional BI and next generation. So the traditional is dashboards, where you create visualizations with control. But as you mentioned, Dave, the next generation is a generative user experience where you ask questions of data and the system finds existing visualizations or generates a new one that you can interact with. But it all depends on the underlying data intelligence. For Databricks today, though, this is the definition of a gold data product with its metrics and dimensions, which we'll get into. So this is the point of this is the system of engagement drives the enrichment of the system of intelligence. and vice versa. They're intricately linked. That's the key point.
So let's stay with the engagement tier for a moment, because that's really where the business value is realized by the users. So the next focus in George's framework, we're going to highlight a company called Sigma. They're an independent partner in both the Databricks and the Snowflake community. We're using this as an example. It's a spreadsheet native front end, and their sweet spot is marrying the familiarity of Excel with the horsepower of cloud business intelligence, and now bringing in Gen AI. So think of it as kind of citizen developer platform where business users don't just, consume the data, they don't just, maybe cut the data, but they craft, let's call them lightweight data apps. And all this happens inside in theory anyway, George, the Lakehouse governance guardrails. So we think this matters for two reasons. First, it somewhat neutralizes Snowflake's early lead with companies like Sigma and other BI players by making the tool equally, first-party citizen on Databricks. And second, it's strategic. It seeds a future where those BI apps, in this case Sigma, or other BI players, maybe including Microsoft Power BI, we heard from Satya Nadella at the Databricks Summit, can invoke operational workflows, effectively turning a BI workbook into this trusted metric system of record. So George, unpack how tight the integration really is and whether Sigma and other BI can become an on-ramp for domain experts within sort of the Databricks confines to contribute semantics rather than just consuming dashboards and or siphoning off themselves.
Okay, so the most sophisticated next generation BI tool really will start to support intelligent data applications. You're not just generating rich visualizations and interacting in natural language, but this is where you want the analytics to directly inform existing operational applications. This is a future where a human or an agent can close the loop between analytic data and the existing operational application. This is actually working today, for example, with Blue Yonder's advanced supply chain planning applications using Sigma as a front end and relational AI underneath to integrate the dimensional semantics, the cubes, with full operational application semantics. And we highlight this because this is a capability that all vendors will need. It's the idea that we don't just have dashboards that look good, we have dashboards that drive operational applications. That's the direction we're heading in. That's why we highlight it. And the glue is the data intelligence, again, that Ali is talking about.
Now, just to put a finer point on it, the example you gave about Blue Yonder, that is, in Sigma's, that's running on Snowflake, but I think your point is, and we'll show some data that shows how proficient Databricks is at going after some of the traditional domain of Snowflake and vice versa. But just to clarify, that's correct, right, George? That is
correct.
Snowflake example, right? Okay.
It's a Snowflake example, but showing where both are going.
Yes. Okay. So let's sharpen our focus a little bit on this sort of really important metrics and dimensions block. And this graphic that George highlights the data intelligence behind the Databricks system of engagement. Databricks vision is the same data intelligence is shared by all the tools and governed by unity. That's really important. Matei in his talk, made this point many times and sort of tried to deposition Snowflake and Polaris and Horizon as having to be synced, and in Unity, the benefit is, that is the single governance engine. Anyway, we believe this matters because it's the data intelligence that's going to drive everything. So George, unpack how advanced is the Databricks approach relative to its aspiration? Can Databricks become that on-ramp for a full system of intelligence?
This is reinforcing the point that the data intelligence behind the system of engagement is getting richer with each interaction. But the reason I wanted to put this slide up is that we're still talking about relatively narrowly scoped 2.5 dimensional snapshots. In this case, the slide is showing the data intelligence for customer support. But if you look at the yellow box on the right side, it's really just 3 tables. And the reason it's, I highlight this is ultimately you want a map of your entire business so that you can ask questions from many different angles. Here, the the data intelligence is scoped into essentially very narrow data marts so that you can ask questions about customer support. It's essentially up-leveling strings to things. So it's a 2.5D map, not quite a 4D map. And here it's essentially data products about what happened in customer support. Now, the reason we highlight this is once you get to the 4D map of the entire business, you can ask what happened, why, and what's likely to happen, as well as what should we do from any perspective across across not just customer support, but taking into account returns or fulfillment, things like that. That's where Databricks needs to get to. And that's where they've indicated they intend to go. But in the meantime, Databricks data intelligence takes the BI dimensional semantics, the cubes, out of the BI tool and makes them shared for all tools. That's the key, so that interaction with their own tools as well as third-party tools starts to enrich this. We'll dig into that in a moment.
Yeah, well, let's dig into it now. Go deeper into the metrics and dimensions block. What you're looking at here is Genie automatically surfacing little snippets of knowledge. So in this example that George built, we're showing a metric definition with, again, human in the loop. Very important. It's something that is Ali stressed. Customers we talk to stress this all the time. So you can think of this as a flywheel that Databricks is sort of betting on, meaning the more business users talk to the data, the richer the ontology of metrics and dimensions becomes, and then that relationship is grows in value. So that ontology in turn powers not just BI, but workloads beyond BI dashboards like forecasting or think optimization, and then eventually fully agentic workflows. So we think this is an important inflection point for the data industry. I mean, if, for example, Databricks can capture those snippets at scale, dedupe them and keep them governed, it sets the future of this living digital representation of an enterprise, of its operations. And then from this digital twin, which we've talked about all the time, digital twin of the enterprise, agents can reason, they can act with confidence. And of course, the risk is that you get semantic sprawl where you get unchecked definitions and that gets fragmented, insight gets fragmented instead of harmonized. But George, take us through how you see Databricks' approach and how it proposes to curate and manage this ever-growing and important semantic graph, the harmonization layer, and whether the tooling is robust enough to prevent the chaos that we've seen in the past with self-service BI.
The key point is that if you take this data intelligence out of the BI tool and make it a shared artifact, everyone can enrich it. And that's why we showed that slide, because it's critical to explaining the connection between what we're calling the system of engagement, what used to be a BI tool, and the system of intelligence, which is the semantics, the meaning of the data. And Databricks has to drive the adoption of this system of engagement tied to its system of intelligence, so it can start this flywheel between defining and enriching the data intelligence with user interactions. And this was just an example that they don't show, but I found down in the booth to show how an admin can look through the interactions and approve, just as you were saying, critical ones to avoid fragmentation. So it's part of this shared enriched layer. The idea is that the more third-party systems of engagement support Databricks' data intelligence, the more users interact with the data. And so the more data Databricks learns about that data and then can enrich that critical map. So this example was part of that flywheel. That's why we showed it. And the key point is that data intelligence can't just be specified top-down by some data engineers working off in the corner. This puts a framework in place, as you were alluding to, so that the map, as it gets learned from the bottom up, can be done so in a governed and centrally approved way. Again, the prize is building out an ever richer map of the business. Today, that's the 2.5D set of snapshots about what happened to individual entities or activities like customer support. Eventually, it has to be part of that end-to-end 4D map. That's the data intelligence holy grail. That's what we call a system of intelligence, where not just your data, but all the digital artifacts that define how your business operates become part of one governed asset.
All right, thank you. So let's try to better understand the Unity catalog metrics. So we're going to unpack that. So what we're showing here in the center of the diagram is positioned as the semantic, we call it the clearinghouse for an expanding network of partners like Tableau and ThoughtSpot and Hex and Sigma and Monte Carlo and Calibra and, et cetera. And Databricks' pitch is actually really compelling and pretty straightforward. It's like, let every tool in the analytics value chain both consume and contribute to a shared ontology. And that turns the catalog into a form of a Databricks moat for enterprise context. There's two key questions here that emerge. First, will these third-party vendors really round-trip their interactions back through Databricks, or are they going to try to siphon semantics into their own proprietary platforms? And second, as things like zero-copy federation gain traction, does controlling the meaning of data ultimately outrank owning the data itself? And so the answers to these questions, George, will determine whether Databricks data intelligence flywheel dominates or is challenged from semantic fragmentation. So unpack the mechanics, if you will, and the feasibility of attracting an ecosystem that supports this really strong vision.
Okay, let me start just by comparing it with what we saw from Snowflake last week. Snowflake allows you to import existing third-party BI semantics, let's say LookML, to jumpstart or extend the native Snowflake semantic views. And those views appear to be somewhat broader in scope than today's Databricks data intelligence. But Databricks offers native data intelligence or BI semantics that all the tools pictured above support or announced support for. And we suspect that, we believe, of course, the same thing's going to happen with Snowflake. But the difference is, I think right now, you can't import into Databricks, let's say a LookML or at scale rich semantic or broad semantic model to jumpstart the native Databricks semantics. It's actually, it starts out all natively specified in Databricks. But again, Databricks, like Snowflake, supports all the third-party BI tools, storing their own proprietary BI semantics in a centrally governed repository, as opposed to within each tool. The idea, though, the limitation when they're storing their proprietary BI semantics is that it's useful only for that tool. The goal of drawing it down as a shared service that's native to the data platform is that all supporting tools can use it. That's what makes them part of the data intelligence flywheel. That's why Databricks so urgently is focused on its native data intelligence, and so is Snowflake.
Okay, George, just coming back, a follow-up question on that. So what are the implications? Does that mean a tighter integration, better performance, lower cost? What are the implications of that sort of Databricks native approach?
Ultimately, owning the data intelligence natively allows your underlying database engine to more effectively optimize to that data definition. So there is performance and efficiency benefits, but the most important part is that when it's a shared artifact, everyone enriches it. Everyone who supports it, read-write, can enrich it. And that's that artifact that Databricks wants to own that's essentially above the SQL database. It's the model of your data. And it makes the point that how you model your data is potentially as important as the data itself. That's an example of why in the Salesforce Data Cloud, they very prominently feature the zero copy capability. Their value add is the model of the customer profile of engagement. It's not the data itself. In fact, they can pull in the data at runtime from Snowflake or Databricks for customer-facing data.
All right, let's take a breath from the architectural diagrams and bring in some survey data from ETR. What's relevant here is that Databricks has made some tremendous strides in the market as it pertains to database and what it refers to as lakehouse. So it's become an industry accepted term, and it's showing up in the survey data. So this graphic shows net score or spending momentum on the vertical axis and penetration into the data set on the horizontal axis. Think of it as a proxy, if you will, for market penetration or market share. The point we're trying to emphasize is the progress that Databricks has made and the inroads into Snowflake's strength in data warehousing. That's what this segment is, this cut is. Notice the position of Databricks in January of 2023 and where it is today on the map. By the way, it still has a very highly elevated net score on the vertical axis at 46.2%, well above that red dotted line at 40%. That's considered highly elevated, so it's above that. So not only does it have spending momentum, it's got penetration into the market, I think more than most people thought, us included. So it's doing very well there. So George, they've come from nowhere in database to a leading brand associated with data warehousing, data lakes, lake houses. And now with the Neon acquisition, which they're calling lake-based, they're trying to redefine traditional transaction databases. What are your thoughts on the progress that Databricks is making in this space? Did it surprise you? And why does this relate to the previous chart that we just showed around Genie and SOI?
Okay, so the previous chart we were talking about the data intelligence that glues the system of engagement front end to the data intelligence underneath, which sits on top of a data platform and eventually grows into a system of intelligence. So what Lakebase or the Neon technology delivers is a cloud-native Postgres database, somewhat like what Amazon did with Aurora Postgres, but with additions, bidirectional synchronization to lakehouse tables, and crucially, which we're going to talk about in detail, the agent-native development capability, which is the ability to fork an entire database by an agent using copy on write, which just takes the relevant slice of a database and can be undone. So it works ephemerally, just like the agent. So, and already a large majority of Neon databases are created by AI coding agents, for instance, Cursor or Replit. So this looks like the marriage of analytic and operational databases, and at the very base of that original diagram, the traditional data platform and the traditional system of record. But they don't have to be one engine. That proved to be too hard. That's what we saw with a Snowflake taking so long to try and build Unistore and ultimately buying Crunchy as their Postgres database, which isn't cloud native. So now Databricks has two cloud native databases, one for analytics, one for operational data. One informs decisions, the other operationalizes those decisions in the form of a transaction. So Databricks' position on the graph you showed is only going to be moving up and to the right because they can handle both those workloads. The big issue right now is that it addresses greenfield apps, not legacy interoperability, which we're going to talk about later.
All right, so we've talked about semantics and we talked about the engagement layer. Now let's focus on the data platform itself, the foundation where Databricks unveiled Lakeflow Designer. So this graphic depicts a no-code canvas with natural language prompts that auto-generates declarative pipelines and then anchors them in Unity Catalog for governance. So our view is that Databricks is trying to collapse the historical gap between business analysts sketching data questions and engineers productizing those flows. So in theory, the same data intelligence metadata that we talked about with Genie can now pre-populate joins and transformations and policies inside Lakeflow. So this turns pipeline design into more of think of it as like a guided assembly rather than this just, crazy coding sprint. George, the implications of your graphic, if you bring that back up, this is a necessary move to keep pace with firms like Informatica and Salesforce, Palantir's Foundry, and even ServiceNow's low-code automation, all of which have been promising kind of business-friendly data orchestration. The open question is whether the Databricks semantic layer is it, how mature is it? Is it mature enough to recommend pipeline steps with the same precision as those incumbents that we just talked about?
Okay, so that GUI or natural language driven pipeline development that we saw in this tool is a dramatic usability improvement for Databricks. But I think this offers a new UI instead of writing Spark code to create the underlying declarative pipelines, but you still have to understand the data. That's, again, this data intelligence that's so critical when it's really, really rich, like in Palantir and I believe ServiceNow, certainly Celonis, and definitely Informatica. When that data intelligence is so rich, you can get much closer to generating pipelines for humans or agents to support new data products and applications. In other words, you don't have to understand each component of the pipeline. It's kind of generated on demand for you. That's the direction we're trying to get to. And that's why Informatica is so valuable to Salesforce. It can help enrich their data cloud's ability to model customer profiles and engagement and eventually move them beyond that domain.
Okay, so let's move on to the data science portion of the learnings that we took away from Data and AI Summit. This is where Databricks can leverage third-party vendors like Kumo to demonstrate what happens when you bring together a hybrid of generative AI and classical machine learning. And George, you brought this up as well 2 weeks ago at the Snowflake Summit in the analyst session. And we talked about this, pretty extensively in theCUBE. Our premise here is that Kumo's graph neural network model can ingest raw relational tables right out of the lakehouse and automatically infer relationships that once required, really gnarly data engineering efforts. So in effect, it builds on Spark's original mission, which is making large-scale data, big data, and predictive modeling simpler. And it takes a next step by injecting Gen AI into that whole equation. So we think there, two elements here are notable. The first, and we're kind of depicting them here, Kumo runs natively on both Databricks and in Snowflake, signaling an acknowledgement that customers are going to straddle platforms. And then second, by collapsing data prep and modeling into a single pass, Kumo can lower the barrier for business users to ask what to do next. Remember, we've been talking about, traditionally we're good at what happened and pretty good at why it happened, but what should we do next is the hard part. And so get an answer that can automatically be pushed into an operational system. That's the holy grail. George, how disruptive is this graph neural network as a service approach? How disruptive is that for traditional ML pipelines? And can Databricks turn partnerships like Kumo and its strong position in traditional MLOps into a real, a durable moat?
Yeah, so this is an example of open data and an open application platform where you can bring new compute engines to data that's in an open format. So now the reason I highlighted this is data science, along with data engineering, is what put Spark and Databricks on the map. Now the two revolutions come together, graph neural networks and foundation models. GNNs can read a relational schema without a data scientist having to choose which columns from which tables have to be flattened by feature engineering into a single feature table. Graph neural networks, as part of pre-trained foundation models, can do all the work for what a data scientist used to do. So the hundreds or even thousands of ML models that pervade the big consumer online tech firms like Google or Facebook and took armies of data scientists are now accessible to everyone. So this is, again, predictive analytics. What's likely to happen can become as universally accessible as BI tools that were built for data analysts. So now what we want to see is how, or to what extent, Databricks and Snowflake can leverage this breakthrough as part of their natively governed workloads on top of their data intelligence.
So in the theme of democratization, when George talks about the things that really sophisticated companies like Google and Facebook were doing, bringing that to the masses, you might recall We used the phrase Uber for all many times when talking about intelligent data apps, and this sort of extends that theme. But let's take another pause and breath here and bring in some more ETR survey data that is relevant. Here, we show the same XY graphic that maps just the ML AI sector. So just as Databricks is encroaching on the wheelhouse of Snowflake, the reverse is true, as shown here. Snowflake, a couple of years ago, they weren't even in this sector. I mean, in fact, it didn't even register in the survey until July of 2024. So it was a year ago was when they first showed up in the survey. And now it's showing a 46% net score, so well above that magic 40% mark, with penetration that is actually higher in the data set than that of Databricks. It's got obviously a big customer base as well. So George, both Snowflake and Databricks are making significant progress and inroads into each other's strongholds. What do you make of this finding, and how does it relate to the data science chart that we just showed prior to this one?
I think the idea is that it'll make traditional predictive machine learning as ubiquitous as BI as a workload. In fact, the two should really come together. The challenge was that data science was a highly complex persona. It was a highly sophisticated persona, whereas business analysts could create dashboards. So now, by democratizing data science, you can have predictive machine learning as ubiquitous as business intelligence was with business analysts. The two just will come together and be presented within that system of intelligence.
George, I think you'd agree with me. And these two companies, Snowflake and Databricks, we've always felt, well, at least in the last several years, felt they've been on a collision course. And now we're really seeing how they're lining up to go after what we think is a really important piece of real estate. And it's not just Snowflake and Databricks. It's those two going after what we call the SOI, the system of intelligence layer, but it's also the application vendors, the SaaS vendors like ServiceNow and Palantir and Salesforce, and you'll see many, many others there. All right, George, so finally, let's get to the system of agency, which is the apex layer. Here's where Databricks wants autonomous agents to both reason and act. The centerpiece is Agentbricks, which is highlighted in red. And what we heard from Databricks is we should think of this as a declarative framework which promises to auto-generate the entire agent pipeline and then instrument it with fine-grained traces. And traces, of course, record every step that the agent takes. And then evals, meaning going beyond LLM benchmarks and evaluating how proficient the agent is at meeting a business objective, like driving productivity, which ultimately leads to more GDP and economic growth. And then refining the agent behavior through natural language feedback, not just this thumbs up or thumbs down, as George is showing here. So our premise is that this shifts the focus from prompt engineering to transparently and automatically optimizing pipeline engineering. In other words, define your use case. It might be information extraction or knowledge assistance or custom LLMs or supervising multiple agents, and then let Databricks do the rest. So complementing that is this MCP interface, which ostensibly lets agents call out any supporting tool or app. So we think this ambition is pretty cool, but it's non-trivial. So, today's agents can't push insights all the way up to transactional systems. The developers still have to hard code actions for each external tool. So George, compare this to the capabilities of Palantir or Celonis, even ServiceNow, and unpack how Agentbricks actually works.
Okay, so the key thing is that agent tools today are mostly about engineering what gets fed into a prompt, just the way we might interact with a chat interface, but it's under the covers of an agent. They're feeding the equivalent of a chat prompt. This is most tools. And then there's the really difficult work of creating evals where you test whether the agent does what you want in every context. Now, the Databricks Agentbricks are like the advance from assembly language and data files to working or to building applications with high-level languages and SQL. In that case, the compiler takes what you specify in a high-level language, converts it into low-level instructions. The query optimizer takes the work about what data you want to manipulate, and it builds a plan underneath. So it does much more of the work. That's the same way the Agentbricks will generate a plan of exactly what needs to be done, as well as the evals and the LLMs to judge them. And it also spits out and tracks detailed traces. This is critical for the optimization later and learning, just the way we talked about in the system of engagement, capturing interactions so that you can enrich your data intelligence. The rich traces will form the basis for a Datadog for agentic apps to keep track of what's going on and enrich an even more powerful version of data intelligence. But this is really way far beyond anything I've seen from any agent tools vendor. A couple issues. Today, these are informational apps, as you mentioned, like information extraction, knowledge assistant, etc. The bricks out of the box today don't let you operationalize an analytic decision. We're going to get to that in a future slide. And also, even if a Palantir or a Celonis or a ServiceNow or a Blue Yonder don't yet have as advanced agent development tools, their data intelligence, their 4D map is so rich that vendors, or they may be able to train agents using reinforcement learning, the same technique that OpenAI trained reasoning into O1, O3, and O4, to learn how to see, analyze, decide, act, and learn about more sophisticated business processes that directly operationalize decisions for a particular enterprise. And we're going to, again, unpack that more in the end. Again, this is why Ali said data intelligence is existential. That 4D map of your enterprise may prove to be more important than the most advanced agent development tools, because the agents can learn on that 4D map as opposed to having to engineer the most sophisticated agent pipeline. Marrying the best of both worlds would be ideal. But again, it goes back to this interplay between the power of your data intelligence and then the sophistication of the tools you need to manipulate that.
All right, I got to pick up the pace because I got to go do CubePod. So this graphic here tees up where systems of engagement and agency converge in full-fledged applications. So dashboards, awesome for communicating what happened and a little bit about why, but we think enterprises ultimately want apps that's really seamlessly, if I can use that word, drive the best action. What should we do next? And what we heard at Data Plus AI Summit is that Databricks now gives developers multiple on-ramps, Python, JavaScript front ends, AI-assisted coding tools, the whole Unity catalog and the functional portfolio there, i.e. Lakehouse tables, DB SQL, governance, and the value prop is you get these under one governed roof. Now, Matei was very vocal about the dissonance between Snowflake's Horizon and Polaris and the need to sync permissions. For Databricks, this is the logical end state of its data intelligence stack. In other words, a place where agents, semantics, analytic, and operational databases and custom UX all meet and fuse into business-grade apps. But the story likely holds up in greenfield estates. Reaching legacy platforms like SAP, for example, is going to require Agentbricks calling SAP's agents over Databricks, a new MCP interface, and that connectivity is still early days. We think the big question is whether Databricks can abstract away those brittle API handoffs that we know and love so developers can focus on value and not plumbing. George, break down how ready the tooling is for real-world app delivery, and what milestones should we look for as Databricks tries to move beyond analytic workbench into enterprise-grade application platform.
So this was part of that demo on day one that was really impressive, where they showed not just dashboards and Genie and AI BI, but they showed using a vibe coding tool like Super Blocks. This is one of the vibe coding tools like Cursor, Windsurf, and I believe those are supported. But the idea is that any of these vibe coding tools today are basically building standalone apps. Now, the goal is so that they build Databricks native apps, and that's what they showed. They use Databricks tools and data. A few big pieces still to come. What's not in there yet is Agentbricks. You did mention Lakebase and DB SQL, so operational and analytic data. But once you have Agentbricks, and then once Agentbricks include the ability to talk to, say, SAP, then you have full-blown operational applications that aren't just for greenfield apps, but that can update legacy apps. Now, let me touch on why the partnership with SAP is so important. SAP is OEMing a version of Databricks. Now, this is an example of the challenge of interoperability between legacy apps and these new systems of engagement and systems of intelligence. Interop today is as much of the business issue as a technical one. The key issue is that legacy vendors don't want third-party agents turning what they get in terms of dollars per seat in revenue into cents per API call. And I'm exaggerating because there's terms of service and pricing that hasn't been exposed to agents completely. But that's the business tension. And SAP also has its own incompatible version of data intelligence. It's their own 3D map, what they call their data sphere in their business data cloud. The key issue is it's not fully interoperable. You have to create an SAP data product and share it through Delta sharing into Databricks, or vice versa. And then underneath the covers, SAP will synchronize that data product with S4. What we want to see in the future is that a Databricks agent ultimately talks directly to an SAP Joule agent, if and when we have agent-to-agent support, or you can have a remote MCP, Model Context Protocol connection, hosted in the Unity catalog to specific APIs within SAP. So a Databricks agent might directly talk to SAP. Again, though, it's as much a business issue as a technical issue. And in the future, we'd like to see Databricks ultimately build Databricks data intelligence that looks more like SAP, or perhaps even adopt SAPs as part of its native data intelligence.
All right, let's zoom out and widen the lens on the evolving enterprise stack, which is where our crossing the Rubicon thesis says the next wave of competition is going to take place. So at the base, we still got the lakehouse and data warehouse heavyweights, Snowflake and Databricks, battling it out for data governance and intelligence mindshare. Databricks really pressing customers toward Unity, and Snowflake kind of bleeding Horizon functionality into Polaris in what appears to be a tricky balancing act. You go further out and up the stack, you got landscape fragments, and the landscape fragments quite quickly. You got Power Platform, Hack, Sigma, and the engagement tier. You got Solana, Salesforce, Data Cloud. You got SAP's Business Data Cloud. You got Palantir, Relational AI. Put Blue Yonder in there, ServiceNow, ... Many others vying to become the system of intelligence platform within their respective domains. Say for Solonis, we're trying to be the Switzerland of that layer. And then you got newcomers like Atlin angling to sit on top of it all as the governance control plane. UiPath would say they have, some orchestration, agentic orchestration designs, and they're trying to position there. So all of these trying to eventually leverage the system of intelligence. George, there are a few open questions that are going to decide how this plays out. What really programs the agents? Can those agents reach back and update the system of record natively, not through, brittle connectors? Who owns the value when insight turns into action and workflow? And look, the battle line has shifted from storing data, we've talked about this, the database, to modeling the business and obviously governing, that who gets access to what. And whoever wins that semantic control plane, we think is going to dictate how and where agents execute. So George, synthesize for us, how's Databricks going to fare here? Which vendors are best positioned to extend beyond analytics into full operational loops? And where do Databricks and Snowflake need to double down if they're going to defend their flanks against these emerging rivals?
Okay, so you hit on a key point in your third point, which is who owns the value when you turn insight into operational workflow. That's the system of intelligence. That's where you take the generic intelligence that's powering these agent development tools, and then it learns on your data what happened in your business and can figure out what should happen next. This is the key, again, why data intelligence drives analytics and agents. And data intelligence, though, is meant to harmonize data. First, as we saw in the very beginning, in the form of these 2.5D snapshots in the form of BI metrics and dimensions about what happened. We showed customer support, but eventually in the form of full application semantics that represents the 4D map, which is why did something happen, what's likely, what should we do across the entire business. This will be the most valuable piece of real estate in enterprise software. But as you pointed out, it's emerging in islands, and which is also the idea systems of intelligence are supposed to eliminate. But once we get these higher level systems of intelligence islands, it'll be much easier to abstract and bridge them at this 4D level than we tried in the past at a legacy system of record level. Again, this is why the data intelligence, as Ali said, is so existential. And as you pointed out, Dave, Databricks isn't alone.
Well, last week we unpacked Snowflake's strategic leap. Hopefully we put Databricks and the innovation we heard at Data Plus AI Summit into context of our framework. We're going to close by framing Databricks in the highest stakes race of all, the pursuit of what we call useful AI for the enterprise. We referred to it as enterprise AGI in a previous breaking analysis, using the Holy Grail as a metaphor. Our previous research highlighted that Jamie Dimon's JP Morgan Chase sits on one of the single richest proprietary data troves on the planet, and that data is never going to bleed in to the public internet, which means Sam Altman's consumer scale LLMs ain't going to be able to use that data from JP Morgan to help JP Morgan's competitors. Enter Ali Ghodsi. By collapsing data platform, semantics, and an emerging agent layer inside the customer's perimeter, Databricks is trying to position itself as the on-ramp to what we've called enterprise AGI, i.e. the true holy grail of competitive advantage. So we think the next leg of this rivalry is not going to be fought on benchmark leaderboards. It'll hinge on who can turn private, regulated data into autonomous decision loops and take action at scale under full corporate governance. That is the finish line that Jamie Dimon and other CEOs care about. So, George, give us your closing take. How credible is Databricks as the bridge between enterprises' proprietary data estates and the promise of domain-specific AGI? What milestones should we track to see whether this partnership model can outpace the open internet giants?
Okay, so that key point is, again, data intelligence will build on and specialize the agents from the frontier models, and it converts the general knowledge and expertise from that's trained on the open internet, whether Messiah AGI arrives or not. And as you pointed out, we talked about, ironically, in a previous breaking analysis, why Jamie Dimon is Sam Altman's biggest competitor, because Jamie Dimon can convert his data intelligence into enterprise AGI in a way that Sam Altman, with training on the open internet, cannot. And that's what allows any enterprise that models its data into a system of intelligence can drive intelligent agents and then make any enterprise as intelligent as Amazon.com has become in driving their business. This is how we convert today's siloed knowledge work into analytically and informed work across an entire enterprise. It's the productivity transition from craft-like knowledge work to the managerial equivalent of the assembly line. Again, where you're analytically informing and aligning everyone's work. We'll explain this, of course, in more detail, exactly how might this work in a future episode.
All right, George, you got to go. Thank you so much. Awesome work as always. Really appreciate your time and your contribution. Thanks to Alex Myerson, who's on production and manages the podcast, Ken Schiffman as well, Kristen Martin and Cheryl Knight help get the word out on social media and in our newsletters, and Rob Hof is our EIC over at SiliconANGLE. Thank you all. Remember, these episodes are all available as podcasts wherever you listen. Just search Breaking Analysis Podcast. Published each week on thecuberesearch.com and siliconangle.com, and you can email me at david.vellante@siliconangle.com, DM me at dvellante, or comment on our LinkedIn posts. Check out etr.ai. They got the best survey data in the enterprise tech business. This is Dave Vellante for George Gilbert and theCUBE Research Insights, powered by ETR. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Breaking Analysis.